Could time be running out in New York for the Rangers captain, as multiple reports and insiders suggest that the Rangers could undergo huge changes this offseason, but some fans and insiders are not fully convinced yet, and we'll get into it in this episode of Rangers Digest. Welcome back to Rangers Digest. My name is Darius Domingues, and guys, we've noticed that about 80% of you watching our videos are not actually subscribed to the channel. So if you want to do yourself a favor, hit that subscribe button so you can stay up to date with everything New York Rangers. We're going to keep you updated all the way through here, through the draft, free agency, into next season. It's going to be a lot of fun. So don't forget to hit the subscribe button, and we'll jump right into it. Yes, you did not mishear me. Could time be running out for Jacob Trouba in New York? It's a possibility. We're going to dive into fan reactions and reports in just a second. But let's start at the beginning. Jacob Trouba played in the playoffs, not on an active broken ankle. He broke his ankle before the playoffs started, and obviously it hindered his play. You could see it, and the decision making as well. A lot of people don't realize that, but when you're injured, it does affect your decision making because you're thinking about the injury a little too much. If I make this move or stop here, is it going to hurt my ankle? It's a factor. It's a factor that comes into the mental game of the game in itself, especially in the playoffs. So there were some questionable, preposterous even, plays from Jacob Trouba in the playoffs this year, but overall a pretty solid campaign. I'm not sure personally, before we get into everything in the fan reaction, you want to move on from Jacob Trouba. We will get into it. He's great in the community. He's a great captain for the team. He's a physical presence. And I do wonder if they do keep him, right? Which is, more so the possibility. If they do see a Stanley Cup with him at the helm of the team as the captain. So I wonder if you do stand pat and just change some of the other things. But today we'll focus on Jacob Trouba. And the sentiment going in after the playoffs, a lot of people were mad, all right? A lot of people were mad at not just Jacob Trouba, but management. This is from Tyler. You're telling me Jacob Trouba could have been put on LTIR and given the Rangers $8 million more to use at the deadline. Who handles the Rangers salary cap? I just want to talk. And now, while this is funny, I don't know if that's necessarily the case. He did come back. It wasn't actively broken. Obviously, if it was actively broken, although we know people who've played on broken feet before in the playoffs, other players, I'm not sure they would have taken him out anyway. He's the captain. Obviously, he felt good enough to go, and he did have a solid first two rounds. It's just the third round where it seemed like everyone fell apart. But I think that's a little unfair to Jacob Trouba. And then if you take a look from Adam here, this is long-hanging fruit, but the San Jose Sharks have $37 million in cap space and one of the worst defensive groups in NHL history. Very true. Not a great team at the moment. Nobody is going to rush to sign for that team. It's not difficult to see them interested in Trouba for the next 2 seasons. This one is very interesting because Jacob Trouba would fit the San Jose Sharks as an older player. He's a captain of the New York Rangers, so he can bring that leadership presence to the team. That would be interesting for the Sharks as they have a lot of money to spend for sure. Now, what does a trade for Jacob Trouba look like? I'm not sure, especially from the San Jose Sharks, because I don't think the Sharks are necessarily desperate for a player like Jacob Trouba. I think he'd be a nice add for them. But coming back the other way, obviously the Rangers would want big assets, and I'm not sure the Sharks would want to do that. So that's just one example. But Jacob Trouba was great in the community, right? I'm not sure you want to move on from this player, right? And although Larry Brooks does say that the Rangers are going to undergo huge changes this offseason, or it looks like that might be the case because they cannot get over the hump, I'm not sure Jacob Trouba is the guy. Although you have a lot of contracts, and we'll get into this in a minute, you have a lot of contracts up front that go for a long time, and it's big money, and Jacob Trouba makes a lot of money as well. Looking at you, Mika Zibanejad as well, didn't really perform that great in the third round. How can they get over the hump? Could they use this cap space, for example, to acquire a couple players that could help them do that? All hypotheticals, but from Jay Fresh, I love Jay Fresh. Should the Rangers trade Jacob Trouba? Can the Rangers trade Jacob Trouba? And I think that's the better question. Can they? I think buying him out would be an absolute mistake. I think you stand pat with him at that point. But if you can find a deal for him that makes sense and you get assets back that can help you win now, I think you consider it. I think you absolutely consider it. And you can see it, his metrics there. Again, it seems as if slowly regressing. He is entering his 30s. And it just seems like maybe possibly, he's not going to score you big goals or anything like that, but it does seem like maybe, possibly, he could be regressing just a bit. But, he's great in the community too. I wanted to touch on this too. For the next 30 days, Jacob Trouba is donating proceeds from his art Prince to Athletes for Hope. Athletes for Hope is a non-profit that helps connect athletes to charitable causes, including mental health awareness, which he's big on as well, and he tweeted out last week. And it's a program called Whole Being Athlete. So great stuff. Obviously, he won an award this year for that as well, being great in the community. So, all of that is great. He is very much the captain of the New York Rangers. I'm not sure in this era you want to move on from this player. I think you try and win a Stanley Cup with this player as your captain. I still think he has great use. Again, like I said, very physical presence. I know a lot of Rangers fans right now are angry and maybe would want to move on from him. I'm just not sure that is the best decision at this point. I think there's other areas you can look at shifting and upgrading in. But anyway, we'll take a look at Jacob Trouba's stats and what he does bring to the New York Rangers. Obviously, didn't play the full season this year, dealing with some injuries. And he had, like I mentioned, right? He's a physical presence, and he's just entering his 30s here, so he shouldn't be regressing just yet. Maybe there's something bothering him, and he's dealing with a bunch of injuries, like I mentioned. 191 hits on the season, blocked shot machine. I don't really count plus minus as a real stat for a lot of guys who play on PK and stuff like that. So, or even if you don't, plus minus, unless it's really good or really egregious, I don't really look too much into it. But again, he's not a guy who's going to put up a bunch of points for you. He's a nice defensive defenseman. And a calming presence for the Rangers in a way, right? He brings a little bit of that experience as well. And in a quote from Chris Drury on Jacob Trouba, said, Jacob has been an excellent captain and leader for us. He comes to play hard every single night. It takes everyone to win. It's a team sport. We're going to keep trying to figure it out. And of course, that was Chris Drury, the GM, on Jacob Trouba. And just by this quote, it does lend to he does not want to move on from this player, and he wants this player to help the Rangers win a Stanley Cup in New York. So pretty interesting there from the GM. And you can take a look at this from Kyle as well. He had a great conversation with a former NHL executive / scout last night about what the Rangers could possibly do in their offseason. And he believes with their current cap situation and no trade clauses, it restricts Drury from making a splash, and he believes you'll basically see the same team back in 2024-25, which I think is the most likely outcome for the Rangers this season. But some people not convinced. Larry Brooks predicting today, this was a few days ago actually, this report, that the Rangers won't run it back and there will be a major move. And some fans think that is a good sign. So it's pretty interesting. What do you think? Should the Rangers move on from Jacob Trouba specifically? Should they, shift somebody else out? What would you do if you were Chris Drury this summer? Logically speaking, because of course we can all, think with our feelings and trade this player because he had a bad performance in this game or whatever it is. But logically speaking, who would you move on from? Would you move on from Jacob Trouba? Personally, I'm not sure that is the move for the New York Rangers. And what do they do with Shesterkin? I think that's very interesting too. They have to get that contract signed heading into next season. Very interesting for the New York Rangers. Let me know what you think in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe so you can stay up to date with everything New York Rangers.